There is a silent instant that precedes all true love. It is the moment when the heart stops seeking and simply begins to see. In that instant, love is no longer an emotion, a promise, or a bond. It is a revelation. It appears as the backdrop of all experience, the invisible space that surrounds every glance, every breath, every farewell. And when consciousness awakens to this, it understands that there was never any separation between the lover and the beloved. Love doesn't happen between two, it happens through everything. But before reaching this fullness, most of us live love as a broken mirror. We try to recognize ourselves in the eyes of another, but we see only fragments of what we believe we are. We love with hope, with fear, with attachment, and with a certain degree of desperation. We want to be chosen, understood, kept. We want security in a universe that knows only change. And so we confuse love with shelter, when it is, in truth, the wind. The human mind tries to capture love as one might try to trap the ocean in a cup. It says, "I love you," and believes that phrase defines a territory, a possession. But awakened love does not belong. It is not a conquest, it is a dissolution. It is the moment when you realize that to love someone is to disappear in the presence of the beloved. It is to lose control and, paradoxically, feel more whole than ever. Awakened love is what remains when the self stops trying to love, when the desire to be loved surrenders to the acceptance of being love itself. Because all suffering in love is born from the attempt to turn the infinite into form, the flow into permanence, the miracle into routine. We want love to be a stable house, but it is a river, and every time we try to dam it, it dries within us. In awakening, love is no longer the story of two characters. It is the unveiling of the very fabric of existence. It becomes the way the universe perceives itself, not as subject and object, but as pulsing unity. The flower does not love the sun. It blooms because it is the Sunday. The wave does not love the sea. It is the sea moving for an instant. Likewise, the awakened being does not love someone. They are love itself taking human form, smiling, touching, crying, disappearing. But the path to that understanding is paved with farewells. The love that awakens dies many times before it is truly born. It must die in expectations, in illusions, in idealizations. It must die in the stories of forever, in tales of completeness, in promises of salvation. Because awakened love does not come to complete you, it comes to strip you bare. It does not say, "I love you because you make me happy." It whispers, "I love you even when there is no longer any I left to love." And that is where the true miracle begins, when love ceases to be something you feel and becomes what you are. When there is no longer separation between the observer and the observed. When looking at another is looking inward, and touching another is touching the very heart of the universe. In this state, love doesn't need to last, because it is eternal, by nature not in time, but in being. Perhaps this is the secret the ancient masters tried to speak without words. Love is not the opposite of fear, it is the silence behind it. It is not the antidote to loneliness, it is the presence that recognizes we were never alone. It is what remains when all stories collapse, when the search dissolves, when the heart, tired of trying to possess the infinite, finally surrenders to what it always was, a reflection of vastness itself. To love like this is to live without guarantees. It is to walk naked between the birth and death of all things, knowing that nothing can be held, yet everything can be lived. It is to allow love to come and go as the wind passes through a field, without owner, without destination, without explanation. It is to discover that fullness does not lie in being loved, but in loving without purpose. And then awakened love reveals itself. It is not an intense emotion, it is a profound clarity. It is not a fire that consumes, it is a light that reveals. It is the simple realization that everything that exists is already loving you. The sound of the trees, the touch of the wind, the gaze of a stranger, the ache of absence. All of it is love, manifesting in 1,000 forms, inviting you to awaken to the truth. You never needed to be loved, because you are love itself, dreaming of being someone. When that perception blossoms, life itself changes texture. Losses cease to be tragedies and become portals. Separations cease to be punishments and become transformations. The heart no longer asks for guarantees, it simply trusts. And that trust is the highest state of love, because it is love freed from fear, control, and need. It is love that surrenders not out of ignorance, but out of wisdom. And at that point, awakened love is no longer something you feel. It is something that feels you. It is the universe breathing through you, seeing through your eyes, living in every gesture of acceptance. The self dissolves, and love remains vast, silent, complete. And when awakened, love becomes the foundation of consciousness. Something subtle, almost imperceptible, begins to change in the way we look at the world. We no longer see people as means to fill the void, but as momentary expressions of the same totality that dwells within us. Every face becomes a mirror. Every pain, a reminder that there are still parts of the self asking for light. Every encounter, an opportunity to dissolve the boundary that once separated us from the whole. Awakened love makes no distinction between the sacred and the profane. It sees beauty even in what the mind calls ugly, because it recognizes that even shadow is a form of light that has forgotten how to shine. It looks at suffering not with pity, but with tenderness. It understands that pain is life's way of calling our attention to what has not yet been accepted. And so, instead of fleeing, the awakened heart embraces. It holds chaos as part of the dance. It understands that imperfection is the most perfect way for the divine to manifest itself. To love in this way is to lose the taste for judgment. It is to perceive that the other has never truly been wrong, only misunderstood the story. And when that compassion blooms, love ceases to be a selective emotion and becomes a continuous perception. It does not choose who deserves it, because it knows that worthiness is an invention of fear. Awakened love does not ask whether the other is deserving. It simply recognizes that the other is part of itself. But it takes courage to love this way, because such love offers no certainties. It does not protect, it exposes. It does not promise eternity. It reveals presence. It invites you to shed every idea of us, them, mine, yours, until only what has always been remains the silent space where everything unfolds. And it is in that space that true forgiveness is born. Not the forgiveness that says, I forgive you, but the one that perceives there was never anything to forgive. Because awakened consciousness sees that every mistake is a clumsy attempt to love, every conflict is a way of seeking reconnection, every wound, when touched with awareness, becomes a portal to compassion. The forgiveness of awakened love is the recognition that there is no guilt, only forgetfulness. At this point, love becomes freedom, not the freedom to leave, but the freedom to stay without fear, to remain even when the other departs, to remain even when the world changes, to remain even when everything you believed about love collapses before your eyes. Because awakened love does not need anything to remain, it is the very remaining, and perhaps that is why it frightens us. Because it takes from us the comfort of possession, the identity of someone who loves someone. It pushes us into the unknown, where to love is the same as to die to control, to die to narrative, to die to the desire to be recognized. And when that death happens, something sublime is born, the lightness of simply being. Awakened love is not a flame that burns, but the air that keeps it alive. It is the silent backdrop of every gesture, every word, every shared silence. It does not need to be named, for the name already limits it. It does not need to be defended, for nothing can threaten it. It is the space in which everything is born and everything disappears, and yet nothing is lost. Sometimes the awakened heart weeps, not from pain but from vastness. It cries because it recognizes the beauty even in what departs. It cries because it understands that even absence is a form of presence. It is a weeping without sadness, a cleansing cry that opens space for love to flow unobstructed. In that weeping lies wisdom, the wisdom that everything truly loved never goes away. It merely changes form, and then awakened love becomes prayer. Not a prayer addressed to a distant God, but a silent hymn to the miracle of existence. Every breath becomes a yes to life. Every moment is recognized as sacred, not because it is extraordinary, but because it is real. Awakened love is that reverence for reality as it is, imperfect, fleeting, alive. When consciousness reaches this point, the very concept of seeking love loses meaning, because seeking implies distance, and awakening reveals there was never any distance at all. The flower does not need to chase the sun, it blooms because it already contains it. So too does the awakened being realize that loving is not something they do, but something that makes them be. And the final miracle is realizing that this love depends on nothing. It is not born of reciprocity, encounters, stories, or happy endings. It is the very field in which all encounters occur, the invisible fabric from which every experience is woven. And when that perception settles in, even loneliness ceases to be a burden. It becomes fullness, because awakened love does not need company to exist. It is the silent companionship of consciousness with itself. It is present in everything, in the touch and in the absence of touch, in words and in silence, in presence and in departure. Awakened love has no form, yet it is what gives form to all things. It cannot be found, it reveals itself. When the seeker finally grows tired of searching and surrenders to what has always been looking through their eyes, and in that instant the entire universe smiles within you. And when there is nothing left to seek, awakened love reveals its purest face, silence, a silence that is not the absence of sound, but the fullness of presence, a silence that needs to prove nothing, explain nothing, conquer nothing. It simply is, and in that being, all restlessness dissolves, like snow under the sun of consciousness. The heart no longer asks, "Who am I?" because it realizes the question was the answer in disguise. Awakened love is the moment when the seeker surrenders, the instant when the I bows before the mystery and recognizes, "I have never loved, never lived, never existed, apart from that which I so deeply sought." At that point, love becomes indistinguishable from existence itself. To love is to breathe, and to breathe is to pray. The touch of life upon you is the touch of the divine, even when the human part cries, errs, or loses its way. Everything is included, nothing is rejected. Because awakened love does not exclude or correct. It integrates. It embraces the world as the ocean embraces its waves, knowing each is fleeting, yet none are outside of itself. And when this vision stabilizes, even the idea of enlightenment loses its meaning. There are no longer steps, no arrival, no goal. There is only the now, infinitely vast, infinitely complete. Fullness is not a reward for the journey. It is the journey recognizing itself as love. The awakened being no longer tries to understand the mystery. They become the mystery in motion. And in that movement, everything becomes a dance, birth and death, union and separation, remembering and forgetting. All is one gesture, the gesture of love, recognizing itself in every direction. Perhaps the most beautiful aspect of this state is its simplicity. Awakened love has no hurry, no fear, no posture. It can express itself in a lingering gaze, a spontaneous laugh, a shared silence. It can manifest in the everyday washing a cup, watching the rain, listening to someone with true attention. For the awakened one, there is no difference between doing and being. Every action is prayer. And then the heart understands. There is no need to maintain love, for nothing can be lost. Loss is only love changing form. Time, death, distance, none of these can erase what is essential. Awakened love does not fear the end, because it knows that the end is merely another way for the infinite to reveal itself. Thus, What remains is presence. A presence so serene it no longer desires to understand what it feels. It simply feels, and in feeling, it dissolves all boundaries. It is the presence that looks at another and whispers, without words, "I see you," and in seeing you, I remember myself. In truth, the entire journey of love is a return to what never left. Every pain, every farewell, every reunion was simply the path folding back upon itself to bring you home to the center. And when you return, you see that you never left. The love you sought in countless faces was only the reflection of the love that has always been you. Thus, awakened love does not promise a happy ending, it reveals that the ending never existed. Love does not complete itself, it recognizes itself. It does not end, it changes its silence. And in that silence, the universe rests. And you, who hear these words, may now feel something stirring within, not as emotion, but as remembrance, a formless, ownerless, timeless remembrance. It is love in its fullness, whispering through your very heart. You were never separate. You never needed to be loved. You are love itself, awakening to its own being. And so, everything returns to what it has always been, simple, mysterious, whole.